Hello and welcome into the Wild Tales Podcast, the wildlife and animal storytelling podcast. I am your host, Mike Bona, and since the conception of this podcast, I have been looking forward to having today's guest on to tell his stories. As you know, if you've been listening, I am a giraffe fan, a giraffe fanatic, I guess you could say. So, of course, I've had to have on Julian Fennessy, the founder and president of the Giraffe Conservation Foundation. I first met Julian back in 2010 at the Phoenix Zoo. They were hosting a giraffe conference for giraffe care professionals from all over the country and some from outside the country, so I guess you can say all over the world. And Julian was there giving a presentation about the state of giraffes, and I remember him talking about how giraffes were suffering a silent extinction, is what they were calling it, because there were fewer than 100,000 individuals in the wild. Giraffes populations have declined by 40% in the past 30 years. And there are fewer giraffes in the wild than there are elephants in Africa by a 4-to-1 ratio. There's almost 500,000 elephants compared to 100,000 giraffes. And this really got me inspired to want to get involved with giraffe conservation. That was February 2010, and by November that same year, I was working with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation in Kenya, working on a surveying project with Nubian giraffes. And I've been there several times back. I've been really inspired by Julian, and I was hoping to get him on one of the earlier episodes, but he's a busy man. He's out there in 21 different countries throughout Africa saving giraffes, and he's making a big impact. Since then, giraffe populations have increased. The latest estimate shows there are about 110 to 120,000 giraffes in the wild. So they are doing a fantastic job, and it was such a joy to talk to him and have a nice chat. He does make references to my anniversary we were talking about off mic. My wife and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary, so you may hear references to that in our chat. So without further ado, please welcome the president and founder of the Giraffe Conservation Foundation. Here is Julian Fennessy. You look comfy, ready to go. I'm sure you have some exciting stories out in the field.
Giraffe picture behind me. That's fine.
I mean, I can see if I can Photoshop one. It's more work for me. I got I don't know if you can see him. You might know what that is. Bearded dragon. Australia's finest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we also talk about something else about being the bearded dragon, but yes, I can see that.
Try to make this a family show, but you can tell me that later. Got bearded dragon. My Disney posters behind me.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, no, I should be at the office and I would have those giraffe behind my head, but I decided I'd had enough of today. What was I trying to do? I've been writing a paper on Mozambique and historical occurrences of giraffe and looking up things and making my head go a little bit crazy.
Oh, homework, fun.
Well, at least someone pays me for it, I suppose. Hang on, that's me.
At least you pay yourself for
it. Idiot. Cool. Okay, we can do what you want.
So, Julian, you are the founder and president of the Giraffe Conservation Foundation, one of my favorite organizations. I love it because you let me come out and play with you from time to time.
Oh, hang on. Yeah, we get to come in and play with giraffe together.
Yeah, together. Obviously, that's what I meant. Yeah, so you get to go out a lot more than I do, which I'm very envious of. I want your job. I mean, I love my job, but I think your job's a little bit more exciting at times, except for right now when you're in the office writing papers.
Yeah, but it's cool, Mike. I'm not going to complain at all about my job.
I might. So you get to go out in the field and play with these gigantic, magnificent creatures from time to time. I'm sure you have some exciting tales from while you're out there.
Yeah, I probably have a tale or two, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I suppose we can, talk about a little bit. Some are better than others, and some probably PG, so we'll stick to those ones.
All right, what should we start with, the good, the bad, or the ugly?
I think let's stick to, I've got a little story about a time in Ethiopia. How about that?
Love it. Let's hear what you got. I may have heard this one, but for everyone else, what happened in Ethiopia?
So Ethiopia is a beautiful country, rich in culture, people. It's actually got a bucket load of people. It's got more than 100 million people in the country. But luckily, giraffe have been hanging on in some sort of areas on the periphery. And one of these specific areas I'm going to take you to is Gambella National Park. And that's on the border with South Sudan. And I don't know if you know anything about South Sudan, but it's been a bit of a naughty country over the years. Yeah, it's not a great place to go on a holiday. I think I heard on the radio actually this last week that there were 652 tourist permits to South Sudan this last year.
From where?
Made me giggle. Yeah, but who's going to hell? Let's go to South Sudan, man.
U.S. sounds lovely for an anniversary. Let's go to South Sudan.
Yeah, mate, if you got 20 years coming up, I think, your wife would be loving that trip, So anyway, I was with a BBC film crew. We were filming a thing called Giraffe, Africa's Gentle Giants. Actually was narrated by Sir David Attenborough, so that was
I've heard of him.
Bad. No, I've heard of him too. Actually, but funnily enough, in America, it was a PBS one, and they changed his voice over to some American chappie because they thought he sounded a bit old and no one had heard of him.
That should be a crime. They've done that with other documentaries that David Attenborough has narrated in the U.S. I think he did the first, I think it's Planet Earth, and then in the U.S. they used, I think it was like Oprah or something, which is fine, I guess, but you can't compare. I mean, he is the GOAT at what he does. He's the best.
Totally. It really baffled us. Although it was, initially they had thrown it out and it was going to be Harry who was going to narrate it. Harry to his mates, Sir Prince Harry to the rest of the world. But unfortunately, he was a little bit busy at the time, so it was great. David, stepped up to the plate, and obviously anyone who says your name from a Sir David Attenborough side, makes you feel like your job is done. But definitely from a giraffe side, it's far from done. But anyway, so we were out there. Let me get back to the story. And we decided to drive out. We had a local operator helping us, and we were going quite close to the border and just camping for a few days just to get what they call be real, sort of figure out. I hadn't been to this part of the world. Do giraffe move through there? We stopped off at some villages, and obviously there's not too many people driving around in the middle of nowhere there normally. And it was a little bit, weird, I would say, from, coming from Namibia, which is sort of Africa for beginners. And we set up shop inside the national park, camped. We went driving during the days. And one evening we came back to camp, and we were sitting there and might have cracked open a beer. It was pretty warm out there, so one had to rehydrate. And literally we sort of looked off into the distance and said, guys, do you see that? And what are you talking about? There's a whole bunch of people actually over there. And we were middle of nowhere, as I say, inside the park. And they came closer and closer. And I know you haven't heard this story. And all of a sudden, they stood around our camp. So there was about 5 blokes. All of them had pieces of animals that they had illegally hunted. In particular, these were white-eared kob, which now are part of that big migration that people might have heard about in South Sudan, into Ethiopia. And they, with their AK-47s and equivalent, decided just to come and join us in our camp. We had one ranger with us who, he had a gun. I doubt he had any bullets in it. And he started to have a go at them and was shouting at them, and we're sitting there a little sort of nervous, as one would be. Drink went a bit quicker than it should have. And yeah, these guys, eventually they, sort of sternly looked at us for about 10 minutes and then just walked off into the sunset. I can tell you, when you're sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and literally this is nowhere, you have no support, you have no phone network, no nothing, and that happens. It's, they were telling us something. There's no doubt about that. But that's not all. The next morning, we woke up to the whole place ablaze. They had set fire everywhere around. And so we got it as a little bit of a message. Maybe we should move on. Yeah, definitely no giraffe in this area. So that was sort of one quick and dirty part of that trip. And I don't know what you think about that one, but I can also describe a little bit more about what happened after that.
That's terrifying. But yeah, I want to know what happened after that. I mean, does it get worse than that?
Yeah, who would have thought? So we moved on and we changed camp, and I was actually then went and joined the African parks. They had a base in another part of Gambela National Park, and they brought in a helicopter, and we were going to put some GPS satellite units on giraffe, but also many other animals to figure out what was going on in this landscape. Huge, beautiful, so many animals moving transboundary across into South Sudan. So let's stick some units on and figure out what's going on, collect some genetic samples. We had no clue really what flavored giraffe they were. Turns out that they are Nubian giraffe, and it was actually the final piece in the puzzle, so to speak, to figure out how they were the same giraffe as those in Uganda and Kenya, which we always thought they were a little bit different. But, science is science. It kind of tells you stuff that you can't expect. But we went down to this base. We started collaring a few different antelope in the first couple of days, and then we said, okay, we're going to go far in because anticipation was there. I'd already spent a little bit of time, but couldn't spend too much more time. And right literally on the border with South Sudan, there was a forested area. So we went in and we found a few giraffe, and we darted them from the helicopter, got on the ground. Once it sort of slowed down, we caught them, put on the GPS tags, and off they go. And, this is sort of what we've done in many countries over the years, and, everything going swimmingly, darling. And then all of a sudden, we go a little bit ahead and we see a couple of people, and we saw a whole bunch of cows. And so the helo pilot sort of came a little bit lower to go over. And all of a sudden, as we looked down, I was sitting on the side, I just saw three guys turn their guns up at us, and all you heard was clacker, 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 and bullets flying all around us. Crazy. Helicopter pilot dropped even lower, straight over the top of them. Supposedly that's the great defense mechanism. I can tell you, it scares the bejesus out of you. And flew off, because you could hear some ricocheting off the helicopter, and that's a bit scary because you don't want it to go down, obviously. And we stopped a couple of kilometers away. He left the helicopter running. We all jumped out, obviously a little bit shaken, checked everything. Everything was running smoothly. There just fortunately seemed to be ricocheting, sort of some nicks on the helo. Most importantly, AK-47s, they do not shoot straight. So that's a really good thing to know. I reckon you could be standing in front of mine. Someone probably wouldn't get you. Yeah.
I want to try to avoid standing in front of one. So you're making friends all over Ethiopia.
Oh, mate. I mean, it's just like being in the hood. It's, it was a bit crazy. So, and then quickly checked, got in, and then flew back to base and closed everything down and made a few calls around to different people. Just seen one of my mates who was working for the president at that time in Ethiopia randomly. And so it turns out that they arrested these guys eventually. They were cattle rustlers who had stolen like about 100 head of cattle and were moving through the park. But that was, I can tell you, one of the more scary moments chasing giraffe in Africa.
I love all these stories from different countries working with giraffes and other animals. The scariest moments you have are with people and not the animals.
It's always people, mate. They're the problem. Animals, they say you should never work with them and small children, but I think with enough drugs in an animal, you know what it's going to do.
I guess you can't say the same about people.
No, that is so true.
So I didn't know about
so that was crazy. Yeah, no, I hadn't told you about the fire before, I think.
You told me about the helicopter one. I believe, if I remember last time you told it to me, you talked to your lovely wife, Steph, right afterwards, and then you guys had no communication for how long afterwards?
Okay, so do you want the PG version or do you want the just the reality version?
Is there a version I can share on the podcast?
Yeah, it should be not too bad. It just more makes the fun out of me. So after we landed back at the camp, and obviously everyone shared their version of what went on, and we'd come up with plans to go back and do what we want to do to get these giraffe. We might have had a whiskey or 4 bottles. And so later that evening, I thought, I normally ring Steph and to tell her every day that everything's fine. Either send a message over a satellite phone or give her a quick call. But after I had a couple of whiskeys in me, it may not have been the cleverest of moves to ring her at about 11 o'clock at night and just say, we've been shot at, can't believe it, we're alive, we're going back tomorrow, love you, see you, bye.
That's a nice thing to know, to let her know you're safe and everything's fine. She would appreciate that. Am I wrong?
Not until the next day, where I may have forgotten to call again and say, hi, everything's fine. So she was less than impressed. And so we have a rule now, and that was a few years ago, and we continue that rule, is that don't tell me that you'll ring me tomorrow if you don't ring me tomorrow. Yeah, lesson learned. Boys will be boys. And note to self, Julian, don't be an idiot. But all's well that end well.
That's right. I think not being an idiot's in your future. I know you too well.
Yeah, no, there is no pill for stupidity. So, no, it's all good fun.
No, I think my family has adopted that rule in the form of anything bad happens to me while I'm out in Africa, I save those stories until I get home. Because, fortunately, I never had any negative experiences. I've never been shot at or had any bad people encounters. I've been charged out by a rhino once, but outside of that, it happens.
I mean, there's always a story, and that's the problem. Whether how much you want to embellish it or not, of course, is this part of it. So it depends on if you got your mates around or not. But I think anywhere that we work, and we're in like 21 countries across Africa, and some good, bad, and the ugly, as you know, and some of them are nicer for traveling in than others, but you're always on an edge in some of these places, whether you've got full-on security 24/7 around you in places like Niger, where we caught and moved giraffe a couple of years ago. That was super hectic. And, we had people from police, we had rangers, we had military. They were all telling us one thing, and then they were all doing another thing. And that was, I think, like mentally the probably hardest thing to really go with, because you cannot stop here. We have to move through this area. We cannot stop here at night. It's so close to the Nigerian border, where there's been some fun and games. And what do? I think we're going to bunker down here for the next 4 hours, folks. Yeah, just feed the giraffes. All should go well. You'll be good. It's like, what? This is like the one area. No. That was the guys in town. They don't really know what they're talking about. And they're like, And so, none of us get to sleep a wink. And that was for 48 hours we moved these giraffes. And so that was well spooky. But, that's a mental sort of game as opposed to the physical game of, physically seeing bullets fly around you.
Right, understandable. So you work in 21 countries, which is amazing. But some countries obviously are easier than others. How do you focus on conservation and saving giraffes in countries like South Sudan?
Yeah, no, interestingly, while they're all different, there's no cookie cutter approach. You can't sort of say, oh, well, I do this in Namibia, so that's going to fly in Uganda, or do that in Cameroon, and it's going to work in Ethiopia. So places like South Sudan and, say, Cameroon and Niger, so these naughty countries that normally you don't want to go on a holiday to, we try working very closely with government, and we try to get their buy-in. We try to set up, say, a national strategy, working with local partners and the government to figure out what are their needs, because we don't own giraffe, we don't own any land. Our job is to, help Africans save giraffe in Africa. It's their animals. We're just lucky enough to be the ones who get to run around and help them. So it takes a lot of time. I used to, I reckon, have a lot more hair on top of my head than I do now. If anyone's worked with any government, doesn't matter where you are in the world, or try to go get something done by a government official, it can be frustrating. Try and do that in 21 countries in Africa. So we always say that we think Germany created bureaucracy and Africa perfected it.
Well, you do great work there. I do appreciate everything you do for the giraffes. They're one of my favorite animals, as you know, and I love that you give me the opportunity to come help out from time to time.
Yeah, we're lucky to have blokes like you, Mike. And, the zoo community in general is a massive supporter of not just GCF, but giraffe conservation in general. And, we're just fortunate to be silly enough in one sense to want to get on with it and living in Africa. Namibia is a great country, as you know, very well to be based. But, you forego a whole bunch of stuff, family back in Oz, of course, for me, or in Germany for Seth. but the kids have an enormous, sort of future ahead of them after growing up in Namibia. And so we've just given them, I think, the best life possible to go on, and there's no chance they're going to go into giraffe. They're like, I'm going to earn some money and have a real life.
Yeah, you have smart kids.
No,
Conservation is a very noble profession, but as far as earning a lot of money, it's not quite there.
No, but as we both know, we're not in it for the money. And but I think we're just lucky that we have such amazing supporters out there, and it's always nice to come and have a beer with different folks in different places to say thank you, and then plan what the next adventure is. And obviously after your big wedding anniversary, maybe the next thing for you is to we plan a trip somewhere.
I would be down in a second. You know me. My favorite thing about Namibia, I was just there with you, is past May, and then I was there in 2017. It's because I was initially, my first time in Africa, I went to Kenya, and I worked with giraffes there. Beautiful, luscious savanna landscape. And then in contrast, my first time in Namibia, especially the northwest region, it's desert. It's like all sand, very few trees, and just seeing how these megafauna can survive there. It's still, I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, how do you guys live here? There's nothing here. How do you live? It's fascinating. These guys are just so amazing how they adapt to such extreme temperatures and environments. They're amazing survivors, these giraffes.
I mean, they live in the most amazing sort of environments, from really wet sort of areas, which are, seasonally flooded, all the way through to, northwest Namibia, which is hyper arid. It's the land God created in anger, they call it. And I think that's pretty true. So, yeah, but it is stunning. I think one of those things quite linked to that is, how clever are giraffes? And I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. So what's your answer? If you tell me your answer, then I'll tell you what I say.
Clever they are. They're not the brightest bulbs, these giraffes, at least in the zoo setting. I don't know, they're a little more clever out in the wild. They definitely know how to survive. I doubt they're lucking into it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I'm with you to a certain degree that, they're definitely not going to win an academic prize. But I do, I always say that these guys have been around for 2 million years and they've survived. We've been around for 350, 400,000 years as Homo sapiens. So if they've been able to survive this long as modern giraffe, then, let's see if humans are around in another 1.5 billion years. I think at this rate, we're not going to be. So who's the clever one there?
Yeah, they're doing something right. Actually, I tell people they're not very bright, but they're beautiful, so they can marry rich.
That's so good. I say that to my daughter all the time. That didn't come across right, did it?
No, it did not.
She's lovely. She's lovely. But did we laugh? She was like, yep, that's what, marry rich. It's not about what they're like. You'll love them eventually, darling.
It's good advice. I wish I would have married rich, but it didn't work out that way. I was dumb enough to marry for love.
Yeah. It's that's what it's about, hey? Yeah. Now a few years down the line.
Oh, next time.
Still love.
So I'm just looking at the size of the bank account.
Ching ching.
I'm glad she doesn't listen to this podcast.
No, that's good. Steph will be like, oh no, I'm not listening to Julian talk. He's got this funny accent.
Our spouses have something in common. All right,
so
I mean,
talk to me.
It's not typically a very long podcast, but if you want to have another quick story you want to share, or we can end it there.
No,
something that doesn't involve more animals.
No, I have more animals. I suppose I've had a couple of scary moments with animals. There was a couple of years ago we were putting a GPS satellite unit on giraffe in Zimbabwe, and we were working on a property there. Everything had gone really well. We had a helicopter, but we had a ground team, and I was on the ground team. The giraffe, what happens in these captures is, the veterinarian who's qualified, they shoot this opioid, a high, powerful drug. It's, 6,000 times more powerful than morphine. So super crazy powerful drug. We get a touch of it, within a minute. We'd be dead if we didn't have an antidote. So put that in perspective, what we're playing with. And so the helicopter goes in, it gets close, it finds the perfect giraffe, whether we're wanting male or female, and the different sizes. So he darted this male. He might have been a tad on the big side, but that's typical veterinarians because they don't actually have to capture it. they get the fun of just putting the dart in it, and then, okay, you guys, go and catch it. Have some fun. So we were racing through in the cruisers, and we got fairly close to this giraffe, and as we got in front of it, we jumped out with a rope, a couple of us, and we pulled this rope in front of it and got it on the giraffe around the front legs, and we ran with it, and eventually we could cross the rope around its back legs and pull it down. So that's pretty standard giraffe capture 101, although it's a tad bigger than your average cow or anything else around you. Everything went really well, relatively, and by the time it got to get up, there was a few people who, everyone wants to take a selfie, and I want to get another photo with the giraffe. I want to get a photo with the giraffe. And at this stage, I was like, okay, I want to get the giraffe up because it's it just wants to get on with life. And I'd asked, there were some legs that were sort of the giraffe that were around a little bush, and I just said, we'll just move the giraffe a little bit, and we did, so it doesn't get its legs caught on this bush. And as we did that, it moved away a bit, and then the veterinarian said, no, everyone get off, we're just going to let it up. And I'm like, no, I prefer, he's like, don't worry, Julian, this one will be fine. And so as got the head, I was holding the head down, we took off a blindfold, it then gets visually, it gets some light into its eyes so it can see better before it gets up. And it gets into a sternal position, and then from the sternal position, like a horse, it can then get up, because it's real big, remember. So as it went up, this one, I pushed it up to get it into a sternal position, and as it went up, its back legs hit this bush, bingo, it slipped. I was standing underneath it, and so it lands fair smack on my chest, and I'm underneath it. Another veterinarian was also underneath it, and it's just, the head of it is just missed a mate's little kid, and I'm talking about centimeters. Extremely lucky. The kid should have been a little bit further away, but we're not going to go into that discussion. But this thing just knocked the wind out of me, and I'm underneath, and everyone's like, are you all right? And I'm like, I'm fine. And oh man, I've been playing rugby and Australian rules football all my life, but I had not had this much taken out of me. So I got up quickly. They held the giraffe down. I went and sat in a car, literally a minute and a half, and everyone's like looking at me, and I'm still just like, leave me alone. It's just, I couldn't talk. It was like, and eventually I got my breath back, had a sip of water, and I walked back from the car to the giraffe, and I'm like, okay, guys, let's get it up. And we get it up eventually after we moved the legs around away from the bush. Surprise, surprise. And it was fine. And so off it went.
That night, the giraffe, I was sure the giraffe would be fine.
I was more worried about the giraffe than me. I was like, yeah, whatever, Julian, you'll be fine. Toughen up. So yeah, that night, again, I might have had a beverage or two to make myself feel a little bit better. The next day,
tea, I'm sure.
Oh, totally. Everything. Jägermeister's herbal. So that's fine. So yeah, so we went and caught a whole bunch of giraffe the next day, running around doing exactly the same thing. And then the day after that, I was flying back to Namibia, or actually in America, you like to term it, or some of your people, Nambia. But I was flying back to Namibia, and I got on the plane, and it was really sore, my chest, like super sore. And I knew obviously something was wrong. For some reason, the guys I was with, they bumped me up to business class. I think it was the first time I got bumped up into business class. So this is in Southern Africa business class. This is not like real world business class. So my seat was like 2 centimeters wider. That was it. And
upgrades and upgrade. I take it.
No. I'm not gonna be upset at all, mate. So
yeah,
the host he comes down, and I was sitting there, and I had tears down my eyes. And it's like, and the people next to me are like, "You're right." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I had just sneezed, and my Lord, so painful. And he is like, "Okay, you want a coffee?" I'm like, "Yeah, coffee would be good." And I wasn't crying; I just had tears streaming down my face. And so And then he grabbed a bottle of Amarula, which is a little bit like Bailey's, if you a medicinal purpose. Yeah, it's so good. He filled up my coffee half with Amarula and gave it to me, and he said, this is an elephant coffee because it's got the elephant picture on it. So that sort of eased the pain, and I finally got back here, and I was all good. And I rang my mate who is also a medical doctor here, and I said, what should I do? Come in, X-ray, something like that. And he said, Julian, if you've just flown all the way here, by the way, he said that was really stupid without checking beforehand, and no lung is punctured or anything like that. He said, you've definitely got a bunch of broken ribs. And it turned out I had 3 broken ribs as a result of it. He said, go buy yourself another bottle of whiskey because that'll be the same price as the X-ray, and enjoy yourself. He said, because you can't do anything. Toughen up and enjoy. We'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, I'm surprised that much weight on your chest. That you're lucky you didn't do worse. But what's a few broken ribs in the name of conservation?
Totally. I mean, I'm sitting here now, and I can feel my chest, and it's got a massive bump. So it's called a bone bruise. Where those broken ribs are, where they heal, it's a massive bump on my chest. All of these years later, so it's a nice little friendly reminder that giraffe are bigger than you. So be careful.
I always keep that in mind, yes. I try to stay under their feet, and I guess their chest as well.
But I mean, you guys, when you play with their hooves and things like that, I mean, that's spooky. Those things are like dinner plates.
They are. They're not as, thick and massive, but they can pack a punch.
They kill lion and whatnot with their feet, so there's no reason why, if a zookeeper is trying to give them a little bit of a trim, which, I can understand the reasons why. Make me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I always find it funny how, even though we both work with giraffes, it's completely different environments, and what you do makes me nervous and what I do makes you nervous, and we're both comfortable in our jobs.
Yeah, luckily that makes the world go round, so which is good. Yeah, I'm happy to chase away a whole bunch of buffalo while I'm running after a giraffe in the wild versus, those hooves, I'm not going to trim it. No way in hell.
Well, that's fascinating. I'm glad you've come through. I'm sure that wasn't your only close encounter in the field, but I'm glad so far you've come through in one piece.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll. I'm sure we've got a few more stories in the future we can obviously have together or share more for sure.
Oh, definitely. We'll see how long this podcast lasts. I got a couple in the can, so at least a few more. But yeah, if it keeps going, I definitely want to have you back on. I know you have more stories. You're one of my favorite people to talk to and hang out with, and I love to share a beer with you. Although because of the time change, you're drinking a nice beer, and I'm down in some coffee right now. Although some elephant coffee sounds good. That's what I should have done.
Yeah, no, I've got as we discussed earlier, but not on air. It's called Namibia's Finest. This is a Tafel lager, so it's cold. It's the end of the workday here, so. And I'll tell you that I actually played cricket, and that's a sport that we actually have the US national cricket team in Namibia as we speak.
Lucky you.
So, yeah, it's captain or coached, by an Aussie. So I played cricket for the first time last night in over 20 years, and I'm in so much pain. This whole sport thing, as you get older, I'm going to go chase giraffe. It's so much easier.
Yeah, I know a couple of years ago I went to go out to play some softball, thinking like, it's a breeze. It's just a softball. You slow pitch softball. The next day, it's like I could barely move. I'm like, this is what it's like getting old.
Like bruised hand, like a groin issues. I'm like, I want my money back.
U.S., though, we're trying to make a name for ourselves in cricket. We beat Pakistan in the World Cup. Look at that. I follow it. I know what's going on.
Yeah, you beat Namibia yesterday. So,
did we?
Namibia's up there. So, yeah.
Look at that. And it'll be in
the... before you leave.
It'll be in the Olympics in 28. Cricket's going to be in the Olympics.
In LA. It's going to be in your downtown.
Yeah. I might have to try to see if I can get tickets to a game.
I might have to see if that's a good time of year to come over and do a trip to the States, time it with the LA games.
If you do, there's a beer waiting for you.
Okay, sold.
Well, thanks for hopping on, Sharon. It's always a joy hanging out with you.
Cool. Likewise, Mike. Thanks, mate. And hopefully we'll catch up more soon.
Yeah, keep saving those giraffes.
Cheers, mate. All the best.
Huge thanks to Julian Fennessy for joining me on today's episode. Please check out the Giraffe Conservation Foundation at giraffeconservation.org. You can learn everything you could possibly want to know about giraffes, all the work they're doing, all the different projects throughout the several different countries in Africa, all the great work they're doing. and it'll also have links to all their social medias. They're at Giraffe Conservation on Instagram. So go check them out and give them a follow. If you are not following this podcast yet, you can go to Instagram at Wild Tales Pod on Instagram. And you can also want to get involved or have a question or some insight or a story you want to tell. You can send an email to wildtalespod@gmail.com. That is tales spelled Tails, tales, as in what's attached to the backside of animals. You get it. Anyway, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time here on Wild Tales. Stay wild, my friends.